You know what's interesting? The avoidant, the one who always needed space, the one who pulled away when things got too close. They often think they're protecting themselves. They tell themselves, I just need time, or I'm not ready for something serious. But the truth, they're not avoiding you. They're avoiding themselves. Because when someone finally comes along who sees them, who actually understands the walls they've built, it's terrifying. Not because they don't want love, but because for the first time, love is standing right there, looking them in the eye, saying, I see your fears, I see your flaws, and I'm still here. And that level of acceptance breaks their defense system. They don't know what to do with it, so they push it away. They sabotage it. They convince themselves that they'll be better off alone. But here's the twist. When that person finally walks away, the avoidant feels something they never expected: real loss. Because for the first time, someone wasn't trying to fix them, chase them, or manipulate them. Someone just understood them. And you can't replace that. You can find new people. You can date again. You can distract yourself with work, friends, and endless scrolling. But deep down, you'll always remember the one person who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. The avoidant learns the hard way that emotional safety isn't found in distance. It's found in connection. And once they lose the person who gave them that, they start realizing too late that the thing they were running from was the thing they actually needed most. Avoidance isn't about other people, it's about fear. Deep, unspoken fear of vulnerability. When someone becomes avoidant in relationships, it's rarely because they don't care or because they're incapable of love. It's because somewhere in their past, love became tangled with pain. Maybe they were hurt by someone they trusted. Maybe they grew up believing that emotions made them weak, that needing someone was dangerous, or that closeness always leads to disappointment. So now when someone gets too close, they pull back. Not because that person did something wrong, but because intimacy feels like walking into a fire they've already been burned by. Avoidance is a defense mechanism dressed up as independence. It's the voice that says, I'm fine on my own, when what they really mean is, I don't trust that anyone will stay if they really see me. It's not a lack of love, it's self-protection disguised as control. They control distance, they control timing, they control how much of themselves they reveal, because control feels safer than connection. When someone starts caring about them, it threatens that control. Suddenly their emotions are no longer neatly tucked away. They're being pulled out, exposed, and seen. And for someone who's spent years keeping their feelings under lock and key, that exposure feels unbearable. They often rationalize it. They'll say they need space, or they're not ready for something serious, or that the timing is wrong. Those are just softer ways of saying, I'm scared of what this means. Because to open up means to risk being hurt again. To be vulnerable means to let someone in knowing they could leave. The avoidant brain interprets closeness as danger, so it does what it's wired to do. It creates distance. They stop replying as much, they seem detached, or they bury themselves in work or distractions. But behind all that space, there's usually confusion. They don't fully understand why they're pushing away someone who makes them feel seen. They just know that something inside them feels too exposed, too real, too close to the truth. The irony is that avoidants often crave what they fear most: connection. They long for someone who truly understands them, who doesn't demand constant reassurance, but offers steady presence. Yet when they finally find that person, their system goes into panic mode. Love feels unfamiliar when you've built your identity around self-sufficiency. They might think, if I let this person in, I'll lose myself. When in reality, it's the walls they've built that keep them lonely. That's why avoidance isn't about other people. You can be kind, patient, and understanding, and still find that they pull away. It's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their fear. They're not avoiding youth. They're avoiding what being close to you makes them feel. Because that feeling, that deep emotional openness, reminds them of moments when vulnerability was met with rejection, abandonment, or shame. They promised themselves they'd never feel that powerless again. So they build emotional armor and call it independence. They say they don't need anyone. But inside, they're tired. Tired of pretending not to care. Tired of running from feelings that never really go away. What they truly want is safety, not solitude. They want to be loved without the fear of losing themselves. But the only way to have that is to face what they've been avoiding all along: themselves. Avoidance is a silent battle between desire and defense. They want closeness, but they also want control. They crave love, but they fear dependence. They want to be understood, but they resist being seen. That tension defines their relationships and keeps them trapped in cycles of connection and withdrawal. Until they learn that vulnerability isn't a weakness but a bridge, they'll keep mistaking distance for peace. The truth is, they're not protecting themselves from others. They're protecting themselves from the risk of feeling again. But feeling is the very thing that makes them human, and ironically, it's the only way they'll ever find the love they're running from. When someone sees through an avoidant person's emotional armor, it shakes something deep within them. They've spent so long mastering the art of appearing calm, collected, and in control that being seen, truly seen, feels like being exposed. To most people, being understood is comforting. It means being accepted. But to the avoidant, it's unnerving. They've spent years building walls not just to keep others out, but to keep their own emotions safely contained. When someone begins to read between the lines, to notice the silence behind their words, the hesitation behind their distance, or the softness they hide behind their strength, it feels like their private world is being invaded. For the avoidant, understanding feels threatening because it disrupts their sense of safety. Their safety doesn't come from love or connection. It comes from predictability and control. When someone starts to understand them deeply, that person becomes unpredictable. They know how to reach the places that the avoidant has worked so hard to bury. It's like being emotionally naked in front of someone for the first time. Even if that person is gentle and kind, the feeling is overwhelming. They start to wonder what this person will do with that knowledge. Will they use it against them? Will they leave once they see the flaws and insecurities behind the facade? When someone understands an avoidant person's fears or patterns, it triggers an internal conflict. Part of them feels drawn to that person because it feels like home. Finally, someone gets them without needing explanations. But another part of them feels panic because they've built their identity around not needing anyone. Understanding, to them, means losing the power to hide. It means someone now has access to their emotional blueprint, and that kind of closeness feels like a trap. They've spent so much time believing that love equals loss that being understood feels like the beginning of that loss all over again. They often test the person who understands them. They might pull away, become distant, or act indifferent to see if that person will still stay. It's not a conscious game, it's a defense mechanism. They want to know if the understanding is real or if it's temporary. Because in their experience, being seen has usually led to disappointment. People say they understand, but when the avoidant withdraws, when they become quiet or need space, most people take it personally. So when someone truly does understand them and doesn't demand constant closeness, it creates confusion. They don't know how to respond to acceptance that doesn't come with conditions. The more someone sees through them, the more the avoidant starts to question their own walls. They realize that their independence, which once felt like strength, might actually be loneliness. But admitting that is terrifying because it challenges everything they've told themselves about how to survive. If they allow someone to understand them, to really know them, it means letting go of the idea that distance equals safety. It means risking heartbreak, disappointment, and loss. And that's a risk they've been avoiding for years. Understanding also means accountability. When someone can see the real reasons behind their avoidance, the fear, the insecurity, the need for control, it becomes harder for the avoidant to hide behind excuses. They can no longer just say, "I'm not ready," or "I'm better alone." The person who understands them can see that it's not about readiness. It's about fear. That kind of mirror is painful. It forces them to confront the truth they've been running from. They're not avoiding people, they're avoiding pain. And being understood means that pain is no longer hidden. For the avoidant, love that sees through the walls is both their greatest desire and their greatest fear. They want to be known, but they're terrified of what happens after. Because once someone truly understands them, the avoidant can no longer pretend they're fine. They can no longer hide behind the illusion of independence. Being understood strips away the layers of emotional armor and exposes a longing they've spent their whole lives denying. The longing to be accepted without needing to earn it, to be loved without being perfect, and to finally rest in connection without feeling trapped by it. Being loved by someone who truly sees you is one of the most powerful experiences a person can have. Yet for the avoidant, it's also one of the most uncomfortable. They've built their emotional survival around the idea that love is conditional, that affection has to be earned, and that showing weakness leads to rejection. So when someone comes along who accepts them as they are, who doesn't demand change or perfection, it challenges their entire belief system. They're used to being on guard, to managing how others see them, to keeping their heart at a safe distance. But real love, the kind that sees and stays, dismantles that structure piece by piece. And that kind of vulnerability feels unbearable. When love becomes real, it strips away every mask they've learned to wear. The avoidant, who often presents as confident and independent, suddenly finds themselves feeling exposed. They're seen not for what they do or how well they perform, but for who they are beneath it all. Their fears, their doubts, their quiet longing for connection. And while that should feel comforting, it instead creates a sense of danger. It's as if the person they care about is standing too close to a wound they've spent years covering. That kind of intimacy doesn't just make them nervous, it makes them feel powerless. Because if someone can love them in their most unguarded state, it means that person also has the power to hurt them more deeply than anyone else ever could. True understanding in love removes the distance they've relied on for safety. It demands emotional honesty, and that's something they've spent their life avoiding. When someone says, "I love you for who you are," the avoidant hears, "I could lose myself if I let this continue." It's not that they don't want to love back. It's that love brings them face to face with their deepest insecurities. They start wondering if they're truly enough, if they deserve that kind of acceptance, or if it's only a matter of time before the person sees something unlovable and leaves. That fear makes them retreat, sometimes without even realizing why. They may start to find fault in the person who loves them, focusing on minor imperfections or imagine flaws to create distance. This isn't because they've stopped caring. It's a defense mechanism. It's easier to convince themselves that the other person isn't right for them than to admit they're afraid of being loved too much. When love becomes too real, too raw, it threatens the avoidant's sense of control. They've always been the one who decides when to open up and when to pull away. But genuine love doesn't follow that rhythm. It asks for openness, for presence, for surrender. And surrender is the one thing the avoidant has always resisted. For them, intimacy can feel like a loss of identity. They've been self-sufficient for so long that letting someone in feels like letting go of themselves. Yet, paradoxically, the very thing they fear, being known, is what they crave most deeply. They want love that feels safe, love that doesn't demand they be anyone other than who they are. But when they finally encounter it, they don't know how to receive it. They might question the other person's motives, assuming that no one could love them without expecting something in return. They might even test that love by pulling away, just to see if it's strong enough to stay. This creates a painful cycle. The closer someone gets, the more the avoidant withdraws. The more love they receive, the more threatened they feel. And yet, when that person finally gives up and leaves, they're left with an ache they can't ignore. Because even though it scared them, that love was real. It showed them a glimpse of what connection could feel like if they allowed it. It wasn't weakness, it was freedom. But to accept it fully, they'd have to confront everything they've been avoiding. The fear of being hurt, the belief that they're unworthy, and the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. That's why love that sees them is so hard to accept. It requires them to stop running, to stop hiding, and to finally trust that being known doesn't mean being broken. It means being human. When the avoidant loses someone who truly understood them, something inside them cracks open. For most of their lives, they've believed that distance equals safety and independence equals strength. They've built their identity around not needing anyone, convincing themselves that closeness only leads to pain. But when the one person who saw through their walls is suddenly gone, that belief begins to collapse. The silence that follows isn't peaceful, it's deafening. It's the kind of emptiness that makes them realize they weren't avoiding people. They were avoiding themselves. Losing the person who understood them becomes the mirror they can't look away from, the one that reflects every emotion they've tried to bury. At first, they may try to act unaffected. They'll tell themselves it's for the best, that they need space, that they weren't ready anyway. They'll distract themselves with work, friends, or anything that keeps their mind busy. But avoidance only works when there's still someone to push away. When that person is gone, the space they once craved turns into isolation. The quiet moments they used to find comforting now feel heavy. Their thoughts start circling back to the same question: why does it hurt so much if I wanted this? That's when they begin to understand that what they were avoiding wasn't the other person's love. It was their own fear of being seen. The loss exposes the truth that they secretly valued being understood more than they ever admitted. That kind of connection doesn't come around often. To be known without explanation. To have someone see your patterns, your silences, your defenses, and still choose to stay, is rare. When that person walks away, the avoidant feels something deeper than regret. It's not just the loss of a relationship, it's the loss of emotional safety. Because that person didn't just love them, they understood them. And once you've been seen like that, it's impossible to unfeel it. What makes the pain worse is that they know it was preventable. They recognize that their own walls pushed this person away. They remember the moments when they could have opened up, could have spoken honestly, but didn't. They recall the times they chose silence over vulnerability, pride over truth, and control over connection. Now, those decisions echo in their mind, each one a reminder of what fear cost them. It's not just heartbreak they're feeling, it's accountability. The realization that their need for safety ended up destroying the very thing that made them feel safe. In the aftermath, the avoidant begins to see how their patterns have kept them trapped. They start to notice how quickly they retreat when someone gets close, how they mistake care for pressure, how they interpret love as danger. Losing the one who understood them forces them to confront these patterns without escape. There's no one left to distract them from the truth. They're left sitting in the space where connection used to be, and for the first time, they can feel the weight of their own loneliness. It's not just the absence of another person. It's the absence of emotional intimacy. Over time, that loss becomes a kind of teacher. It reveals that emotional distance doesn't protect them. It isolates them. It shows that love isn't supposed to feel like suffocation. That being understood doesn't mean being trapped. They start to realize that connection isn't a threat. It's what they've been missing all along. But this realization doesn't come easily. It arrives in the quiet moments when they remember how that person used to look at them, when they hear a song that reminds them of a shared memory, or when they find themselves reaching for their phone and stopping halfway. Those moments remind them that they didn't just lose someone, they lost the chance to be fully known. The irony is that it's only after losing that kind of understanding that the avoidant finally understands themselves. The pain forces them to see how much they've been hiding behind fear, how much they've confused control with safety. It's a cruel kind of growth, the kind that comes too late. But it's also the moment where healing can begin, because for the first time, they can't pretend that distance is peace. The emptiness has shown them the truth that connection, not avoidance, is what makes them whole. When the avoidant loses the person who truly understood them, they often try to escape the pain by doing what they know best: distraction. They throw themselves into work, hobbies, social media, or anything that helps them stay busy. They convince themselves that if they just keep moving, if they just stay occupied, they won't have to feel the ache of loss. On the surface, it looks like they're fine. They seem productive, composed, even indifferent. But deep down, there's a quiet restlessness that refuses to fade. Because no matter how much they distract themselves, there's no substitute for genuine emotional connection. The noise may fill their days, but it never fills the silence left behind. Distraction is their way of avoiding confrontation with their own emotions. They might start working late, scrolling endlessly through their phone, or seeking validation from new people, all in an attempt to numb the discomfort that comes from losing someone who saw them clearly. But each distraction is temporary. It soothes, then disappears, leaving them emptier than before. What they don't realize at first is that distraction doesn't heal, it only delays. It's like putting a bandage on a wound that needs to be cleaned. Eventually, the pain seeps through, no matter how tightly they try to cover it. The avoidant has always relied on control to feel safe, and distraction gives the illusion of control. It keeps them from feeling helpless or vulnerable. They can decide what they focus on, what they avoid, and what they allow themselves to feel. But real healing doesn't happen in control, it happens in surrender. The more they try to suppress their emotions, the louder those emotions become. The mind keeps circling back to the same memories, the same conversations, the same moments when things could have gone differently. It's as if their subconscious is trying to remind them that what they lost wasn't just a person. It was connection, and connection can't be replaced by routine. Even surrounded by people, the avoidant starts to feel a quiet sense of isolation. They might laugh, go out, or stay busy, but there's an emotional flatness underneath it all. The laughter doesn't reach their eyes, the conversations don't touch their heart, and the success they chase feels hollow. Because what they're missing isn't stimulation, it's understanding. They miss being known without having to explain themselves. They miss the comfort of someone who could read their silences and still feel close to them. No amount of distraction can replicate that kind of intimacy. In time, they start to notice the contrast. The more they distract themselves, the more drained they feel. The activities that once felt like escape start to lose their meaning. Work becomes repetitive, scrolling becomes empty, and even social interactions feel performative. It's as though everything they're doing is happening on the surface while something deeper inside them remains untouched. That untouched part, the part that longs to be seen, heard, and loved, keeps whispering for attention. It's the same part they've been avoiding for years, and now it's louder than ever. Eventually, the avoidant begins to understand that distraction isn't peace, it's a pause. It's a temporary shield that protects them from pain, but also keeps them from healing. The absence of the one who understood them leaves a void that can't be filled by noise. That void demands honesty. It asks them to stop running, to stop pretending they're fine, and to finally sit with what they feel. It's only when they allow themselves to feel the loss fully that clarity begins to emerge. They start to see that love wasn't the threat. It was the hiding that hurt the most. Distraction keeps them moving, but it doesn't move them forward. It numbs the pain but never resolves it. The avoidant eventually realizes that all the things they use to escape connection, work, independence, solitude, are meaningless without someone who understands them. The loneliness they once thought was freedom now feels like confinement. Because no matter how many things they chase, nothing can replace the feeling of being truly known. The loss becomes a reminder that emotional connection isn't optional. It's essential. It's the heartbeat of being human, and once they've felt it, no distraction in the world can make them forget what it means to be seen. For most avoidant individuals, control has always been their version of safety. It's the invisible shield they use to protect themselves from the unpredictability of love. They believe that if they can manage their emotions, keep people at a distance, and decide when to connect and when to retreat, they'll never be hurt again. Control gives them a sense of power in a world that once made them feel helpless. But what they eventually discover, often through loss, is that safety doesn't come from control, it comes from connection. True emotional security isn't built on walls, it's built on trust. And trust is something you can't maintain if you're always running from vulnerability. The avoidant has learned to equate emotional independence with strength. They tell themselves that needing someone is a sign of weakness, that depending on another person means giving away power. But connection doesn't mean losing power, it means sharing it. It means creating a space where both people feel seen, heard, and supported. When they avoid that kind of intimacy, they're not protecting themselves. They're isolating themselves from the very thing that could make them feel whole. Real love isn't a loss of control. It's the experience of being safe enough to let go of control. When they finally lose someone who provided that kind of emotional safety, the truth starts to sink in. They realize that all the distance they created didn't make them stronger. It made them lonelier. The person who once felt like a threat to their independence now feels like the only place where they ever felt understood. That realization is what breaks the illusion of control. They see that safety doesn't come from managing emotions or keeping others at arm's length. It comes from allowing themselves to be fully present in connection, even when it feels risky. For the avoidant, control is a reaction to fear. It's a way to prevent the unknown, to avoid the chaos of emotion. But love isn't predictable. It requires surrender, trust, and acceptance of uncertainty. The paradox is that by trying to control everything, they end up losing the one thing they're trying to protect, their peace. Because peace doesn't live in distance. It lives in connection. It's in the comfort of knowing that you can show up as you are and still be accepted. It's in the small moments of honesty, the shared silence, the feeling that you don't have to hide anymore. The journey from control to connection is uncomfortable. It requires them to unlearn years of self-protection and to face the fears they've spent their life avoiding. They have to confront the belief that being open means being weak, that love always leads to loss, and that people can't be trusted with their heart. But when they begin to take small steps toward vulnerability, when they let someone in without overthinking every move, they start to experience a different kind of safety. The kind that doesn't depend on walls, but on understanding. In connection, they find that safety isn't the absence of pain, it's the presence of trust. It's knowing that even when things get difficult, they don't have to face everything alone. It's realizing that love isn't about control or perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's messy. When they finally let themselves experience this kind of closeness, they discover that the fear that once controlled them begins to fade. What replaces it is something softer, peace, belonging, and the quiet strength that comes from being known and accepted. For so long, the avoidant has believed that safety meant keeping their heart guarded. But connection teaches them that safety is actually found in letting someone in. It's in being seen without performing, in being loved without conditions, in allowing themselves to trust even when it feels unfamiliar. Control kept them alive, but connection helps them live. And once they experience that kind of safety, they can never go back to mistaking distance for peace again. In the end, what the avoidant often learns, sometimes too late, is that love was never the danger. It was their fear of being known that made it feel unsafe. They spent so long trying to protect themselves from pain that they ended up protecting themselves from peace. Because the truth is, safety doesn't come from walls, silence, or control. It comes from connection. It comes from being brave enough to stay when it feels uncomfortable, to speak when your instinct is to shut down, to love even when your heart still remembers what it's like to be hurt. Losing the one who truly understood them becomes the mirror they can't escape. It forces them to see the difference between solitude and loneliness, between freedom and fear, between control and connection. And maybe that's the quiet gift hidden in heartbreak. It shows us what really matters. It strips away the ego, the excuses, the pride, and leaves us with the truth. That love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up as you are and letting someone see you. Not because it's safe, but because it's real. So if you've ever been the one who loved an avoidant, who tried to reach someone behind their walls, know this: your love wasn't wasted. You showed them what connection feels like. You gave them a glimpse of the peace they've been running from. And even if they couldn't stay, even if they didn't know how to receive it, a part of them will always remember you as the one who saw them clearly when they couldn't see themselves. And if you are the avoidant, maybe this is the moment you stop running. Maybe this is where you decide that being understood isn't a threat, it's a gift. Because love, real love, doesn't take away your freedom. It gives you a place to finally rest. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for having the courage to explore the parts of yourself that are hard to face. If this message touched something in you, take a moment to share it, to talk about it, or to pass it to someone who might need to hear it too. And remember, you don't have to be perfect to be loved. You just have to be open. Thank you for your time, for your heart, and for showing up here today. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay open, and never stop believing in the kind of love that understands you, even when you don't understand yourself.